Sahiti program titled Children's Literature in Indian Context. And the writer speakers who are with us are Bal Sharma ji, who will chair the Bal Sahiti program, and the speakers are Sabha Bashir ji, Sanjula Sharma ji, Sunita Bansal ji. I take this opportunity to thank Professor Madhashri Lal ji, who convenes the Sahitya Akademi's English Advisory Board, for so creatively maintaining variety of subjects in our literary programs. Last we had a forum on poetry of transition. Before that we have translation of poetry, and received very well. So this evening at Bal Sahiti, first at the outset I welcome all the participants and I formally introduce them. Srimati Bal Sharma ji, who chairs the Bal Sahiti program, is a painter and writer based in New Delhi. She has published 21 books which include My Scented Awns, The Perfect Woman, Anger of Aubergines, Banana Flower Dreams, and Now That I Am 50. Her books have been translated into Italian, French, German, Chinese, Spanish, and Finnish. Her books for children are Fable Book of Gods and Demons, The Children's Ramayana, Walking Through the Hills, Secret Tales from the Himalayas, and Fantastic Creatures from Indian Mythology. Srimati Sabha Bashir ji is a poet, author, and translator. Her first book was a collection of poems, Memory Past. Her PhD on the poetry of Gulzar was published, titled I Swallowed the Moon, the Poetry of Gulzar. She has also translated Gulzar's screenplays on Premchand's Godan and Nirmala and other stories, along with other pieces of fiction by Premchand and Manto. Her recent books are Andhi, Insights into the Film, and Women of Prey, a translation of selected stories by Manto. Sabhaji is an assistant professor at the Department of English and CPIO exams at Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. She is also the associate editor of Women's Link, a gender-based journal. Srimati Sanjula Sharma ji is a journalist writer based in Delhi. She did her masters in English literature from Jadavpur University and has written extensively for national dailies and journals in both India and Kuwait. She was scriptwriter for ZTV and later worked as a consultant editor for All India Management Association. Sanjula has authored 8 books of fiction and poetry. She is the founder of Happy Minds Learning Center, where she organizes literary and creative events. She has been conducting creative writing workshops for children for many years at India Habitat Center, Delnet, British Council, and schools in Delhi. As an active member of the Poetry Society India, Sanjula ji organizes poetry programs in the capital. She is also a volunteer with Tamanna, a school for children with special needs. Srimati Sunita Bansal ji, a mythologist and a storyteller, has been involved in creating all forms of media for over 4 decades, heading media and publishing houses. Her forte is to decode Hindu scriptures to show their relevance and application in today's times. She has authored 29 books for adults and young adults, Decoding the Philosophy of Mythology, and 1,000 books for children on folk literature and scriptures, which are sold in multiple languages globally. She explores and reinterprets the timelessness of characters from the epics and foundational texts in her stories, seamlessly blending mythology and history with real life. With this, I heartily welcome again all the participants and request Bal Sharmaji to open the Bal Sahiti program.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
Right.
Hello, thank you so much for that introduction. Meeting all the panelists, welcome. Wonderful to be here on this happy occasion and celebrating children's literature, which, as you all know, is a very, very important aspect of our age-old culture, and we've always had a very rich tradition of children's books, which somehow got sidelined. And then it's slowly emerging now, and with the help of creative writers I have here with me. So I will start by asking you a few questions, Sunita. How do you see it? You've been a writer for many years, and how do you see the change coming in?
Thank you, Bhavan, and thank you, Madam. Thank you, Sahitya, for this session of Sahitya. Yes, I have been involved in children's literature for over 40 years, actually 43 years now. And what I have seen is that earlier it was, we used to create books for Western kind of system, psychology, education, looking at the education system, looking at the courses that the students had to go through. So the books were using names which were, we used to call them global names, so it would be like Tom and Jane and stuff like that. So it used to be very difficult because we used to aim that our books should sell globally, which of course, as I was heading a publishing house, it was a requirement. So we did create a number of books for global audiences. But while I was there, I had this thing that, why don't we talk about our characters? Why don't we talk about our folk tales? And this was one example that I was discussing. This book, The Treasure of Indian Folklore, was, this was published. This book, Treasury of... can you hear me now? Yeah. So this book, Treasury of Indian Folklore, which was published by us when I was at Frank, was about 30 years ago. 30 years is a long time. And that was, that time we used to sell our books all across the globe. And I still remember, and I was telling Bulbul, that I went to Oxford bookstore in Oxford, in England. And it's supposed to be the largest bookstore in the world, or Asia, or UK, wherever. But it did not have any single book from India, which was such a pity, considering that we had so many books coming out from the country. So I went and fought with them, and I asked them why they were not including our books. And they said because Indians write in Indian English. Hence, we do not keep Indian books. Which again, made me very upset because I always considered myself to be a good editor, and I used to see to it that our English was sort of impeccable. So I gave them a copy, and I told them to evaluate, and then let us know. And they went through it, and they said this was okay, this was regular English according to my British English as they would call it, and they placed an order. And since then, we were the first ones to enter the Oxford bookstore from India to sell books. So that is the kind of zeal I have in terms of selling Indian stories, Indian classics, Indian folklore, all across. So that is how I started, and I continue to do the same, that we can come to it, I think, a little later, because
it's changed a lot from the time I started writing. It was very difficult to write about. I wrote a nature book, and all the nature books my children used to read were about English countryside. So they didn't know anything. They didn't know, but they knew what was growing in the English countryside. They knew hawthorn, they knew all kinds of exotic, which I saw when I was 30 years old. But in India, keep more and nothing. So that, I think we've come a long way since that time, and thanks to a lot of good publishing houses that are now promoting, and parents are also doing. So you are a teacher. How have you seen this change, Nisaba?
At the beginning, I'd just like to thank everyone, Sahitya Academy, Gulbuchi, Mala ma'am. It's very humbling to be sitting with people who've been writing so much, and then you feel that you've not done enough. On a personal note, as you're saying, not as much as a teacher per se, but I have seen the difference again as what you said about Gulmohar and things like that. When we were growing up, we grew up on Enid Blyton's largely. So, and we all devoured that, or at the most a little bit of Russian short stories. But I kind of revisited children's literature when I had my daughter. So I started reading with her, and in that gap of 20-25 years, I could see the difference which the Indian publishing houses had brought forth. Here, I mean, there was an exposure to a lot of writers. I mean, when I read Rupa Bai's Taranot series, it was when she was reading Shabnam Minwala, Samina Mishra, Paruana, even Jerry Pinto as a children's writer, I could see the differences not only in language, but in the themes. And again, as you were saying, to bring earlier folk tales back into, that was definitely happening. But even apart from that, as the usual language, and to add to what you were saying about the Gulmohar, when we read daffodils, at least I didn't know how daffodils looked like. And in my imagination, it was always a tulip. Because we didn't grow up with the internet. So I imagined the daffodils poem, imagining it to be a field of tulips, because that I had seen in some song somewhere. It was much later that I realized, so it was much later I realized there are two different things. And had there been maybe a poem on Champa or Raat Ki Rani, we would have been able to associate more with it.
And the sad thing that there was lots, very rich traditions we have of poetry in Bengal, in the south, everywhere with the nature. Mala, you would know how beautifully nature is described, but it was just sort of brushed under the carpet. And I remember doing a workshop with children, creative writing, like I'll come to you just now. And they wrote a story, and they're all English names. So when the story was set in Bombay, I said, "Ye kya hai aapke sare Jack and Robin and all, and Matilda, like serious English name." So then she looked at me and she said, "But Indian children never go on adventures." So it was that, it was totally, Indian children just study. Bas aur kya karte hai bechare. So you do a lot of creative writing workshops. I'll have to switch,
Can I use this mic? Is it better? I'll just shoot this. Am I audible? Yes. So can you just repeat it?
So Sahitya, you do a lot of workshops as we were discussing earlier with creative writing. So what did you see? What is the changing pattern you've seen of attitude from 30 years ago, like Sunita and I were discussing, and what you see now?
I've been doing workshops for quite a while now, and all over Delhi, and in the various institutions also. So I guess get a very mixed crowd of children. If I'm doing it in Habitat, for instance, the level of reading that the children have is actually very high because they're coming from very good schools, let me put it that way. Then if I'm doing it maybe at home, then I'm choosing a very wide spectrum of children to come to me. If I'm doing a forum in IHC, I might have someone coming from Teach for India. So the level of reading is very different. Now, I have a presentation which I've made, which I would like to share my insights with. Because when I got the email, it was written very nicely that every speaker should at least say 10 minutes. So I actually made a presentation, which I'll share. But at the outset, I would like to say that there is a lot of resistance to, doing book forums or even a workshop which is totally based on authors writing in the vernacular, or also writers writing in English in India. So once, I must share this, I was doing a book forum on Rabindra Tagore, And I actually, I met some friends at a gathering and I said, look, I'm doing this. Would you like to send your children? So they said, okay, what is the book forum on? So I said, it's based on Rabindra Tagore. So I thought that there would be that wow kind of a reaction, and they were like, Indian? I said, I looked at them and I was amazed. I said, no, this is what I'm trying to say. That, okay, if we look at Roald Dahl, okay, it's a rage, right? Every author has their pros and cons. Every author has something to give to children. But I said, we have to look at Indian authors, writing not just in English, but also the vernacular, even if it's translations. So then I realized that somewhere there was a change coming in. And I also realized that the change was also coming from schools. It was not just from home, which we had to really work on the mindset of parents, but it was coming gradually from schools, and I was very happy to see that. So that was the change. But I will give my insights in a presentation form if that's okay, because I have made that so whenever in the second round.
Maybe I could ask about a little bit about the translation aspect that you have come across in your years of teaching, because you mentioned that, and that's good link.
I think when I started translating, that was when I was doing my PhD, and since I did it on Gulzar Saab's poetry, he's written a lot for children also. And the PhD focused on it was a kind of a comparison of his film and non-film poetry. So, and he has written some songs in a couple of films which are very, centric, children-centric, like Niki Kathi hai. There are a couple of prayers that he's written. But there are some poems also that he's written. And for my PhD, I had to translate them into English, and that was a challenge. I mean, all translations are equally difficult. But it is then to realize that when you are translating for children, you need to have that kind of a vocabulary. And I try to get into the minds of the writers, for people like you who are writing for children. It's a far most difficult thing in the sense, because you have to reach the level of a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old and make sure that that child understands what you're communicating. Only then will the child connect. So, of course, then translating poetry and children's poetry was, it was a double-edged sword. Because then you want to make sure that you manage to rhyme also, because it's a poem. And I don't know, I can read. Like the other thing that what I discovered in my PhD was that he had written a lot of Pancham Tantra, and his Pancham Tantras are the same stories, but he's written it all over again. So the language is, so these are, the first Pehla Bhag, Dusra Bhag. So the language is, for example, if you wrote it in the 80s, so it's 1980, the language is that, and it is poetic in nature, it's not prose. So we have the Pancham Tantras, which are in poetic form, and I have translated some portions of this. And there's another interesting thing about the Karati tales. I don't know if you've... so these are all changes which came around literature for... So Karati tales are also all rooted in our own folk stories, folk tales, and that is where technology also comes in. Because in today's age, when you're talking to a child, the child is half of the time distracted with something on the mobile phone, on the television. So I remember again, I had got these Karati tales for my daughter also. There were audios where people of eminent, theatre personalities who knew her really need to a lot of them. Absolutely. So there were the CDs were there, so the child could actually read these folk stories, and you play the CD along with it, and there would be a sound of a chadi, which meant that you have to turn the page. So where it is a kind of a combination of technology with folk literature, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
The use of technologies. And have you also experienced, before I just come to you, have you experienced that use of technology has somehow enhanced the bringing children's literature forward?
Yes, I have, and I also made some CD-ROMs using technology, as we're saying. explaining things like I wrote a book, History of India for Children. And there, what I thought was, there are lots of speeches, like Nehru's speech and so on. I thought to give that advantage to children to listen to the speeches. So I made a CD-ROM, which went along with the History of India, with those audios. So I had marked in the book where those audios would be, so that when the child is listening to the CD-ROM, they would see the video and listen to the speech. So yes, technology has helped a lot, and it helps to sell also. I mean, if you look at the publisher's point of view, the books sell better because there's an extra little freebie given along with the book. So yes, that is something which has helped.
And very quickly, would you like to tell us about the Sant Kabir book? Because I think it's a very unique concept what you've done.
This is, yes, one of the unique concepts. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk about the first unique concept I did. The first one I did.
That's wonderful. That's so many, it's not unique, multi-unique.
This was something, as we were discussing, that even when I grew up, of course, we used to get books like Red Riding Hood and all. So even when my children were growing up, they would also get similar books, like Grimm's Tales and fairy tales, essentially. So when I started my own publishing house, which is called Smriti Books, the first thing I did was to write Ramayana for 4-year-olds. This is the Ramayana for 4-year-olds, which I felt should be written, because why should we give adventure stories of Western characters, to our children? Why not, our own? And we have such phenomenal adventures. Ramayana, Mahabharata, full of adventures. So this was a challenge to write, because if you can see, if I can show you, yeah. So this is the challenge here was that I introduced the characters here, and then I use these mugshots of these characters everywhere. So when the child is sitting, remember it's for 4-year-old, the language had to be so simple. So then they start featuring in the story, so that it becomes interactive. So if the parent is reading, then they would ask, who's this? The child would have to say. So it's like, a connect with the characters, so the child is absolutely engrossed.
Drawn into the story and identifies with each image.
So this was the first,
Unique concept.
very unique concept, I must say. And this was done in 2 volumes. And then that Ramayana for 4-year-olds, which was very difficult to write, to explain why, Ram let go of Sita, listening to the Bhavan, all those things to be explained. So this was that one. Now we come to the latest.
My favorite book.
Yes, this has become a favorite. Now, in this, what I did was, now, Kabir, we have read about Kabir a little bit, snatches, a little bit, that this is how he was born, or he was found, and so on, and he was, kind of, who his foster parents were, and dohas here and there, and we would read Kabir in school, in, I think maybe class 8, maybe class 6, 8, dohas. So, and we have to remember those dohas and remember the meaning, the shabda, bhavat and so on. So what I decided, I went through Kabir's biography, because I'm trying to write a book on his biography now. So what I did was I went through the biography, and I had that laid out in front of me. Then I took out some the interesting incidents of his, stories, as we call them, kisse kahaniyan from his life. And those I picked up, selected some of them, and then I hunted for the appropriate doha. So that the story, the child reads the story, it ends with a doha which is connected to the story. So the child can never forget the doha and the meaning, because the story will always remain. Because whatever said and done, if we teach through storytelling, the story remains. Even if you teach, say, mathematics or any principle of physics or chemistry through a story, the story will always remain. The numbers, people forget, children would forget. The stories always have very, very permanent lasting value. So that is what I have done in this book, where the stories are very popular ones, and those are also very popular. It's just that I've kind of knitted them together to create a larger story, and also given the background of Kabir's life, so that when you read this book, you also get to understand how Kabir evolved into what he became. I mean, he was already like prodigy as a child, but actually he also evolved. So what happened in his life, what he saw, what made him think, in what way, and all that also comes through. So it's like, it has a lot, not just a story and a doha, but also his life is going through it and his evolution. So this was another something which I wanted children of this age group, 6+, to have. So this is again.
So that's an amazing concept, and this is how I think children's literature in India has changed. Starting from, if you remember when we were children, we used to read moral stories. The only stories we had in school which were given to us. Otherwise, it was enlightening all the way. So that's why, and now it's all changed, and you're learning so much about your own land, about your own authors, your great saints. So now I'll come to you, and for you have a presentation. You said you want to share with us.
First of all, actually, let me just really give a very grateful thanks to Sahitya Akademi for inviting me here. So, of course, to Malishri ji for this wonderful concept, the program, to Mr. Verma, to everybody. And I must say, I'm very humbled and very happy to be part of a very distinguished day. Of course, the chair herself has written extensively for children, and I've just been, being very, very well introduced, I would say, to your books and your translations. So I think I'm very humbled to be here. And I do write. I write in both Hindi and English. I write poetry and fiction. But most of my work is for children who are, say, 13+, I would say, some of my stories. And in the same collection, I would have some which are not for them. So it's not as if I'm writing specifically for children. But I have interacted with children, with especially middle school children for many years now, doing creative writing workshops. So what I'm going to do is, with my experiences hands-on with these children, I would like to share insights, which are relevant to the subject and the theme of the discussion today. So I just have a presentation. So, let me start by saying that I think good literature, is one of the finest legacies that all languages bestow on children. And how fortunate they are that this priceless inheritance is theirs for the taking, whenever and now, wherever they should want to and find it. But I would like to ask a very pertinent question here. Do majority of the children want this access to good literature? And are parents and schools providing it to them? How can we motivate children to read good books not only in English but also other languages as well, even if they are translations? See, I am a journalist by profession and a writer by choice. In 2010, I moved away from active journalism, where I was writing for newspapers and magazines, to focus on a literary career and writing poetry and fiction. At the same time, I started conducting creative writing workshops for children, not only at home but in various centers, like he read in the biodata, in Habitat and then British Council and schools. So I have a creative platform. It's called Happy Minds. And under this aegis, I connected with children. Recently, I have opened a Happy Minds Learning Center in South Delhi, where I am, doing activities which are not just creative writing workshops, but we are moving beyond to, art, music, painting, because I think now that good literature is a combination of also multimedia. It's very important to teach children not just by writing, but also by other media. So I have a lot of other activities going on there, which I hope helps children. Now, the tagline is, a happy mind creates a happy life. I chose this very deliberately for many years now, and I've conveyed to children that you fill your mind, your life with very happy activities. For me it's writing and reading, for many of us here of course. But for many children it's something else, but you fill your life with happy activities and your life, your mind becomes very happy. So this is what I try to teach the children, but while teaching this, the workshops when I was conducting them, I had a very simple anthem, which is very relevant to today, is read more to write better. Also, write more to write better. You know, like I've just been seeing all this and, you know, people are so prolific here, sitting at the dais, writing all the time, and so many of my friends, all of us, we just keep pushing ourselves to write more because we are still learning, you know, we are still learning. So I told them, and every time I shared this quote by Virginia Woolf, she said, read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. So I tried my best to give this anthem to the children, but not easy. To convince them to leave that mouse which they are so fond of and hold that book in your hands. You know, that feeling which we all grew up with. Holding a book in your hands is totally different from also reading on Kindle. I'm not saying that's wrong. Even my daughter reads a lot on the phone and everything. She's very well read. But I think holding that book in your hands should not go away. You know, you hold it and you actually get very close to the author, and the book becomes your best friend. So this is what I try to tell children. So now, you know, I was also assigned the task of conducting book forums in IHC only for this reason, that let's promote reading among children. Let's promote good reading, not just from the West, but also Indian authors and vernacular writers as well. So what I want to do is, you know, share these takeaways with you, you know, that I realized very soon that most children are not reading enough. Let's start with that baseline. They are not reading enough. And those who are, you know, those who are avid readers are bookworms, and they imbibe not just knowledge, but they begin to write very well. So what I want to say is that the reading level and the writing standard that I encountered had actually nothing to do with age. You know, there is no uniformity here, simply because it's based on the reading and the writing that the children are indulging in, and also simply because reading is of course a personal habit or a passion. So we get to our next point. How do we encourage children to read just not more, but also read better? You know, during my workshops, parents said, oh, my child is so well read, ye bhi padha hai, they've read this, they've read. But when you interact with the child, they haven't read well. You know, it's very important to read a book well, not just read a book, you know. So one way forward can be the introduction of various forms of writing to children at an early age. You know, fiction, poetry, short stories, novels, essays, the novella, 50-word stories. Just introduce all the forms to children at an early age so they have a chance to pick up what they like and what excites their interest.
Sanjula, I'm sorry to interrupt. We only have 15 minutes, so
Okay,
we'll have to wind up and get backtrack on how literature has changed, how
Okay.
books have changed
Now,
in the Indian context.
Okay, now that's what I noticed that, you
So
know.
just a few lines and then I'll get back to
Okay,
something.
so now I noticed that many children are resistant to reading Indian literature, Indian authors writing in English and also in the vernacular. So now, while we don't stop them from being immersed in Harry Potter, you know, or Matilda, or the absolutely new age books coming from the West, what do? We have to keep in mind that we are very good authors writing in English, and I would like to emphasize here that Ruskin Bond is one of them, which the children have to go back, not just for the themes, for the Indian flavor, but also the language. You know, so this is what Vikram said for his poems, R.K. Narayan, Sudha Murthy's book, you know, and of course, you know, the distinguished guys writing here, writers like Paru Anand, Ranjit Lal, Natasha Sharma, Arup Kumar Datta are just a few names from a very long list of talented writers. Now, what I want to come to this point is, many of them present mythology, fables, you know, like you said, folklore and animal tales in a new light, very refreshing. So this is what the children have to pick up. You know, and I want to like to make a special mention here of your Ramayana also. Very compellingly retold in a very fresh and a very, what would I say, ideal style for youngsters. You know?
So I think Sabha now, would you like to share with us, sorry to interrupt, a little bit of what you encountered translating. Have you translated more of the children's genre?
No, that's
Only the bazaar.
I'm writing a biography of Cecilia Dehna Khan for young adults.
Okay.
So that is where I'm writing. But I mean, there's so much being, I mean, I can read out two little lines from
And
what I've...
like you mentioned earlier, which I'll share with everybody, writing for children is really difficult because children are not polite. They will not read your book because they read a good review or they paid 500 rupees or Malashri said it's a good book, read it. They will read the first 5 lines. If you don't catch them, they're gone. They will put the book away.
Most honest reviewers.
Yeah, they're really from the heart. So how difficult has it been?
It's been very difficult. I'll just read out, this is a very famous line from one of the television serials for which Gulzar Sahib had written, The Jungle Book. And the title song for Jungle Book itself was quite a thing at that time. So in Hindustani it is Jungle Jungle Baat Chali Hai, Pata Chala Hai. Thank you! So again, you know, this was kind of an anthem, and that was a popularity of the serial. So now to translate that into English, which itself, I mean, it had the challenge of not only rhythm but the choice of word. And so what I try to do is, there is a rumor everyone in the jungle knows, a fresh flower has bloomed in innocent nakedness. So I mean, there is no way that, you know, the word chutney could have been translated in a way that it had been accepted in the English rhythm. So these were the challenges, and
that whimsy.
And it has to be
whimsical and
Absolutely.
endearing. So you can tell me, have you noticed a change when you first started writing for children and now you write? Do you feel you're incorporating new things that you see around you?
Yes, I do. In fact, now earlier when I was writing, the language was slightly different. It was a little more like, you know, like typical writing for children, short sentences and all that. But now, lately, for the last 10 years or so, I realized that, you know, when I start talking to them through examples of things that I see around them and speak to them in their language, you know, it kind of hits the mark. So that is what I've been doing lately. And we've been hearing about this young adults, you know, a lot. So as you can see, in the last decade or so, this genre has also come up, which means that reading is happening and there is a requirement of books for that particular age group. So, which is where I've written a lot also. Because I felt that is one age group where you can actually talk a little bit of philosophy and a little bit of symbolism.
And difficult subjects.
Yeah,
like Paro has done.
Like you know, Ramayana and all that I've done, I've actually given the symbolism of Ramayana. This is the young adults. So it's like all pictorial in the entire Ramayana. But at the end, what I've done is I've given the, you know, what is behind Ramayana, it's called decoding the Ramayana. So like what exactly it means, what it means to us, our life, you know, the philosophy, the spirituality. So as I keep saying, I decode the, you know, mythological stories, simplify them so that children can identify and they can say that, okay, it's happening all around. Ramayana is not meant for just Ramleelas, you know, once a year. It's an ongoing thing in our life. So that's what I try to do, to kind of, you know, and speak in the language that a child wants to.
That's the most important thing being an author, I find, is to come down not condescendingly, not preaching,
like a friend,
not
you have to
like
speak to them like a friend.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky that I have 2 daughters who've been my guinea pigs.
Yeah.
So great.
Should we open it to questions? We have about 15 minutes, so would you like to read a little bit, maybe?
I have a question for Bulbul. We'll not know that too much about her own writing. Bulbul, you're also a painter. And one of the things that perhaps we can add to this discussion is the role of illustration in the Indian context in which we are talking about. So as a writer and a painter, how have you managed the situation of children's literature in the Indian context?
Thank you for that question. I was so engrossed talking to this lovely panel here. So illustrating has changed a lot because of course you can use so many things from the internet, including artificial intelligence, which you just have to tell them, "Bhai, mere liye tota bana do," they'll make a tota for you, not in Hindi of course. But I find that illustrating is, sometimes I cheat. if I can't draw the thing correctly, I change the story. Because I'm the writer, I'm the illustrator, I can do that. So I never illustrate for other people. But I mainly illustrate images from nature. So that has been a joy doing that, creating birds and flowers and just landscapes. And we have some, now to get back to other people, the illustrations in India and the production, the quality of books, if you see, the children's books is amazing now. We can compete, yeah, you can compete with any foreign publications. We have such amazing illustrators, writers of course, and the publishing houses are willing to put money in because it's always a market driven. Because young parents are willing to pay money for Indian authors and illustrators, the quality of books will come up. So yeah, I enjoy illustrating. But,
if I may add, to what she's saying. So I just picked up this book, I was showing it to her, where different kinds of art forms are there. So the book is just the beasts of India. So again, this is, Gond, Madhubani, all different folk art. So these are just, an exposure to our children, not only about the animals. So we don't have a picture book, which is just, an image from the internet, but all various art forms. So publishing houses are, this is an absolutely, and this was a complete story. If you look at it, it's absolutely, there is an exposure to art also for the children, along with the stories, the stories are also rooted in the folk tradition, yeah.
And folk art, introducing children to folk art through stories is just...
And also I would like to say that in the World Book Fair there's I think this is wall number 3. It has a children's pavilion. Where there are fantastic workshops and all, everything going on by NCC and of course Sahitya Academy and a lot of other this thing. One more point I would like to add is because I've been dealing, you're writing for children who are very young also. But since I'm dealing with children who are like middle school, I think I really encourage them to read autobiographies. Like Mahatma Gandhi's experiments with truth, Nehruji's letters to his daughter and Abdul Kalamji's Wings of Fire. The minute they read autobiographies and biographies of even Indian leaders in whatever language, they are so inspired. Their insights into their lives. And one more thing I want to add is how do we encourage children to really get on to vernacular literature? It's very important. It's not just through books, but also I think schools organizing elocution contests, debates, drama, much more. Because sometimes the spoken word is very stronger than the written word, where the children are concerned and the visuals like we see in the books. So I think we have to think a lot of doing this in schools also. And then encouraging parents to help children read the vernacular. It's very important. We have fantastic people writing.
We also, of course, have an ancient storytelling tradition in India.
Yes.
Sitting under the banyan tree and telling stories.
Yeah.
So maybe we can revive that.
Yes.
So
The Darshan drawing is so beautiful and it's again a form of
Again done in
I'd like to ask a question to Sunita ma'am. Your book, Everyday Gita, has been doing extremely well. I think into its 4th edition now. It's reprint. Great. So how is this book is also targeted at which age group? Slightly senior children, or what is that one advice that you'd like to give everybody? Because I know you've been reading Gita since you were a child. It is a habit in your house. So please tell us what is that one takeaway that everyone needs to.
That book, Everyday Gita, actually is not meant for children, per se, but for anyone and everyone. It should be there in your house and anyone should be able to pick it up and read. And it is written in a way that I've taken 365 shlokas from Gita and explained them in a language the way I speak, and giving examples from day-to-day life, like talking about shopping and stuff like that, explaining the philosophy in a way which is easy to understand. And interestingly, I thought I had written it for adults because that's what the guideline was from Rupa. But it turned out that the maximum readers have been in the age group of 20s, in the early 20s. Yeah, so they are the ones who get in touch with me and who, sort of ask me questions and discuss their issues. So I'm quite gratified. I mean, the kind of response I'm getting from them. And the result was that Rupa asked me to write Gita for Children, which I've just recently submitted, should be out maybe next month. And that is illustrated. And there I've taken some shlokas, not very many, because it's impractical to think that a child is going to learn the shlokas. I mean, let's be practical. So I've just taken a few and I've explained the philosophy. And also, in order to explain the philosophy, I have used other stories from mythology to, so that the child can understand, they can connect, Because children you can't drill philosophy into their little heads. So you have to go through the way of stories, because stories are retained. It's something which we should use as a vehicle.
Also, growing children, the concept of karma, I mean, it's fascinating, I think.
We'll do another session on that, because that's a huge thing we're discussing.
There's so many mental health issues. If you notice, you work with children, all of us work with children, you notice a lot of mental health issues now. They're all stressed, they're all especially exams time, parents are stressed. So I think books like yours really help them to, instead of reaching for counseling.
They're calling money or they get in touch with me for counseling.
Any other questions?
Yeah, simply out of curiosity, how significant is translating children's literature from and into our regional languages? And wouldn't it help children to get to know about other cultures at a very tender age? How do you look at it? Because on this ground, Sahitya Akademi 14 years ago constituted its Sahitya Akademi Bal Sahiti and created so many platforms for the writers who make it a point to write for children.
Would you like to take that? Translation.
So you're absolutely right, it's very important. And when we say translation, I don't know why we think that we're only talking about English. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, a story which is written in Manipuri should be translated into Malayalam, and something which is written in Tamil has to be translated into Assamese and Kashmiri and everything. This within the country, if we go on translating the literature that we have, especially for children, I think we are sorted for the next 200, 500 years. We've got so much of content with us, and these are big projects. And I know some publishing houses have started it, not so much for children, but otherwise, translation from one vernacular into another. These projects are going on. I mean, even I'm a part of one such thing. So we know, but we really have to do much more than we are doing at the moment. And it is crucial. I mean, there's no denying the fact.
Yeah. Add one thing to it, because this is something which is very close to my heart too. I feel that whatever the written word might be, it should be available in every language. We have plenty in our country. So, and it is very difficult to actually go to publishers and tell them that, can you please do our book in Hindi and so on, because there are a whole lot of logistics involved. So what happens is that you have to try and find different ways. Now for children, especially for young adults, in fact I discussed with Mara also once, what I did was, I was talking to a publisher and we decided that we'd create a book of short stories for children, taking our authors like Premchand, Tagore, Manto and so on. So their famous stories, and we'll do them in English and introduce at least the concept that there is Manto was written, or all those, because normally what happens in schools, the books will go in English. I mean, we may talk whatever we may talk about, but if you go to the actual, the ground reality, if we want the book to go into schools, maybe as prescribed, then it has to be in English, because then it will go as 10 short stories. Like we used to do in our school, we've read Tolstoy's and all those things, as short stories. Why not Indian authors? That was with that concept we created this book. So I have done that, for which I had to then, because apart from Hindi and English, I don't know any other language. So then I had to find translations of, say, a Gujarati story or a Bengali story or whatever, and into English, and those translations then I retold in simple language for children, for young adults, for school. So that is one way I'm trying to get into this area. Because
this book is published.
yeah, I've submitted it out of it. So that is how, as writers, if we start feeling like this, then I guess we can do a lot. We can, you know. But we have to also feel like this. That passion has to be there, I guess.
And unfortunately, our writers have that passion. You know, they are very committed for very little money or very little fame. You know,
Many times without
quietly
money.
translating. You know. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a question, but I guess a blend of a few things, thoughts, and it's been very pleasant listening to you all. I mean, honestly, I was awestruck. I was just listening and absorbing things. So a few takeaways from whatever I've observed here. Sanjana ma'am, firstly to you, I completely back what she had said, because I had also conducted a workshop for a couple of students, you can say 25, 30 students in the age group of 10 to 14 years, and their book was released recently also. So I've done it for 2 consecutive years, and this point which she had mentioned that kids end up picking names which are not Indian is very obvious. Because, and I'm telling you about the time period, what is 2024, and talking about November 2022, and then in November 2023 we had our other book. So honestly ma'am, in 2022, the kids ended up almost in all the stories. So it was an anthology of 25 stories written by these young children, and everybody, you know, had used those kinds of English names. Jack, Jill, Jack. You're talking about a village in India.
For the Jack. Jack is in every story.
And strangely at this, you know, in this era also when there's so much of Indian literature of their ages available. So it was reviewed by Shri Gyanchand Jainji, who's a Padma Shri awardee, and he happens to be in the chairing committee of that school. He made it a point and he sent me a message that can we make sure next time when you start the workshop, right in the beginning you have to mention that I want Indian texture, I want Indian names in this. And just one instruction, nowhere did I find any foreigner. I tell you, they were talking about, you know, Kaira, Myra, Samir, and people could relate it better. The review which we received for the second time just with a little change, and I think that's a proof of the transition, and even kids relate to it. Now, coming to you, Shabina, the thing which you had mentioned about AI, it's great, you know, if we are using it constructively and selectively, but I still have a concern for the reason, recently you must be aware. See, publication we know, I mean, of course, you know, I won't be naming anybody, but it is a business at the end of the day. And we have certain forums wherein they are just printing or publishing anything, everything which is coming their way. So there have been certain organizations which kind of, I mean, that's my personal view totally. I mean, one may disagree, but they have created a sort of platform where kids were told to write things, whatever they may write, and there's a certain price tag that you could get it published. Fine. And when you review it, of course you find that there were mistakes right in the very first sentences. You are writing 10 lines, fine, and you are just copy-pasting certain images, and I'm an author, and the teacher says you can't even write an essay well in the class. You know, how are you writing this whole book? So this came as a concern that a book should not just become, or a launch should not be just a moment of glory. That is a concern. I mean, I really do not have answers to that or what can be done, because AI is there to facilitate change in a positive direction. That's my viewpoint. But then, you know, if you're telling the child that you don't have to work on the fundamentals, it's an overnight thing. I just do not believe that writing a book could be an overnight plan. Yeah, it just cannot happen.
Yeah, that's a very tough subject and a totally another seminar that Mr. Verma has to organize on AI. Yeah. And any other question for Sanjana about creative writing? Anything else you'd like to ask us?
I want to put a question for anybody who wants to take this up. With children's literature in the Indian context, is there a difference between rural readers and urban readers in the work that you have written or?
Well, I personally have found that, you know, I go to a lot of workshops with children in Himachal, and they want to read in English, surprisingly. You know, I buy a lot of books from NUT and take them, and they said, "Nee, aap sirf Hindi ki kitabein laate ho, we want to learn English, we want to read English." I took them simple books, you know, any like your Ramayana would be ideal for them, because even if they're 13, 14, their level of English. So they want to actually read about the city life, they want to read about, for them it's exotic, you know, to read about. But and the city children, as Sanjana will know, will just read about foreign lands. Do you find that?
Yes.
Would you like to also answer?
Yes, I mean, to a large degree, they are reading a lot from the West. And they, of course, they are reading good books. I'm not saying they're not reading good books. They are reading good books from the West, but like I said, there is still a resistance to reading authors writing in English. Maybe they're doing that because a lot of the kids want to go to Missouri and have Ruskin Bond sign their books and things like that. And they're very intrigued with all that. But to, I do realize that when children are coming, like I said, from Teach for India or from other places, then they actually want vernacular literature. They do, they actually want it. And then this is a mindset which has to change. It's not as if children are, they were resisting it much more earlier. But I think with the good books coming out,
Gradual change, but there is
a good change. And one more point I want to say is that, the child's mind is a gold mine. It's up to us what we are putting in there. Stories are really, what would I say, would be very inspiring to them. And I think there's a lot that you can do. So I don't think we have to give up, because this is a very relevant thing, children's literature, the Indian context. That's very important, and I think we are moving well forward, but I think lots has to be done.
There are also parallel movements because I'm doing a book for Penguin and I'm translating Rabindra Thakur's Indian tales into Hindi. So there obviously must be a market for that, they're pushing, all your Rani Rukmati, Baz Bahadur, Nalada Yalti, and all those fascinating Sasi Kullu, I'm doing that. So why would they ask? I'm sure that there are parallel movements, though of course the inroads have to be made, we have to see the results, but I'm sure it's encouraging them.
That's a very encouraging. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yes.
Penguin is doing that.
Yes.
Penguin never does anything unless there's a proper market. They have publishers, but they're very grounded.
Yes.
So that's an excellent.
Also for Rabindra Thakur, ma'am was like an icon, and we read her
Yeah.
from history
Yeah,
background.
of course,
She's 19 plus. And she was very excited to know that her book is coming out in India.
That's excellent. So sum it up that we are in a good place. We are poised, I think, in a very, very exciting time in literature, for children's literature, and we've all agreed that we've come a long way, and things can only get better from here. And we have excellent publishing houses, excellent writers, and excellent illustrators, and of course we have Sahitya Akademi to help us along the way. And thank you so much, all of you. It's really been very interesting, and I've learned a lot today.
Well, it's been a wonderful interactive session, as vibrant as children are, actually. And for this, I thank the chair, Bulbulji, and all the speakers, Sabaji, Sanjulaji, and Sunitaji, and of course, Manash, for recommending such a beautiful program. And Rubiji, thanks to you as well for so melodiously reminding the Bengali song. Thanks a lot. We will have some tea together. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I invite all for tea.